All right, welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. It's draft week. I'm your host, Allen Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
Exhausted, and never in my years of working, doing this for a living, maybe even never in my years of being a fan, have I wanted the draft to be over with so much in my life.
You know, I was just thinking about this too. I've been watching the draft since 1988. So this will be my, quick, do the math, 30, 20, 26th draft I've watched. And that includes sitting for some insane reason, sitting watching every single round of the 1999 draft after they traded Ricky Williams. I'm like, they're going to trade back in. They're going to do something to get back in this draft, aren't they? Yeah. So, um, I've watched some terrible drafts. I've watched some good drafts, and a lot of it feels like Christmas.
Yeah.
You're just excited. You've been looking at the equivalent of, for you old school people, you're looking at the equivalent of your Christmas J.C. Penney, Sears catalog,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making your wish list, and you're trying to see, okay, is this this is the guy I want, this is who I want. And now with the advent of YouTube and the internet and mock draft systems and all these other things, you get to play making your Christmas list instead of just sitting through the magazines and circling guys that you like.
Yeah.
It's funny. I've done several mock drafts, and it's tough. We're going to talk about some of these mock drafts tonight. But I mean, you're still excited, even though you're exhausted. You're excited, because you want to see who the next star is going to be for this team,
Mm-hmm.
if there is going to be one. We don't know what's going to happen, but I know one thing that is going to happen. The longest streak in NFL history of avoiding drafting a quarterback in the first round will continue, because barring something a la Aaron Rodgers sliding, maybe, the Saints aren't taking a quarterback in the first round this year. They've only done that one, Archie Manning, in 1971, and they haven't done it since. And they never did it before either. It's an
Yeah.
amazing statistic to think about.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it makes my jaw drop.
Drew Brees, 16 years. Yeah, I mean, Drew Brees, 16 years. Archie Manning, 11 years. Bobby Hebert, 7 years, roughly, we throughout the 1990 season. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that takes up a good chunk of it. Aaron Brooks for 4.5 years. So you're not drafting somebody because you've got somebody under center. But I've done this before, this little exercise before. Trying to figure out when they could have drafted a QB.
Mm-hmm.
And about the only one I can really find where they should have taken one was 1997, when Mike Ditka took over. They should have drafted Jake Plummer.
Yeah.
But other than that, 83, class 83, the Saints didn't have a first round pick because they traded it for Bruce Clark, the rights of Bruce Clark. And they had taken Dave Wilson in the supplemental draft in 81, so they weren't going to get a quarterback in 83. Bobby comes over in 85 from the USFL, so that ruined that chance. So it's strange. They just have never done it, and you look at I know people are screaming at their monitors right now. They should have taken Lamar Jackson in 2018. Well, yeah, it's 1989. This is the Flipper Henderson game.
Yeah.
Somebody brought up Bobby Hebert as being a good Saints quarterback, and I said, yeah, Bobby had some good games. He had some bad ones. This is a bad one from Bobby. There were some they had opportunities to win this game, but like that was an opportunity to win the game right there. Floyd Turner drops an easy touchdown pass. But when this game got close, when it was 17-10 with about 2 minutes left, Bobby blew it trying to put a drive together to put this game away. But it's still a fun game to watch at Dome Patrol.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Bob, with that in mind, not Bobby, but not taking a quarterback, who do you think, this name-wise, the Saints are going to take with the 14th overall pick? And do you think you'll stay with the 14th pick, or are they going to move up or move down?
As far as moving down, I know a lot of fans want this, and I see the logic behind it to pick up some extra picks. But just consider that Mickey Loomis has been on the job as a general manager of the New Orleans Saints for 22 years. He's traded down in the first round one time. That was in 2007 to get Meacham, or to ultimately end up with Meacham. So I think that I think you could feel comfortable making a sizable bet that the New Orleans Saints will not trade down from 14. Trading up, that's certainly in their MO. But that's one thing that I don't want them to do. I realize they need a tackle. I realize that's where pretty much everybody, myself included, expects that they'll go in the first round. And there's also a good chance that the top three tackles, Alt, Fashanu, and Fuaga, are gone by 14. So what I'm afraid of is that the Saints identify one of those guys and say to themselves, we have to move up to get one of them. This tackle class is deep, at least from my own analysis. And I truly believe that there are 7, maybe 8 guys that have a legitimate shot at being a day one starter. But I also acknowledge that, at least in my opinion, again, that there's a rather noticeable drop-off after Alt, Fashanu, Fuaga. But the Saints, realistically, they don't have the assets to trade up and get one of those guys. You have to burn a next year's first-round pick at minimum, to move up, and probably your second-rounder this year. Well, if you do that, you might get your guy that you want at tackle or wherever, but then you don't have a pick between that first rounder and all the way to 150, and now you have 0 assets to move back into day 2. So that's why I believe that Mickey Loomis, for a change, is going to let this first round come to him. And at 14, assuming, Talise Fuaga, Oregon State, keeps sticking in my mind that he's the one out of those top 3 that might fall. I see a lot of people mock drafting Troy Fontano from Washington to the Saints. But if Fuaga and Fashanu are gone, 2 names keep jumping through my mind. J.C. Latham, the tackle from Alabama, and Amarius Mims, the tackle from Georgia. Of the 2, I slightly prefer Mims because, he's a mammoth of a man, and he just has such an upside. But Latham gives you all that experience from playing SEC ball, playing those college football playoff games, et cetera, et cetera. So Mims might turn out to be the better player, but Latham is probably the safer bet. Calvin, Fashanu can run block. In idiot Franklin's system at Penn State, you have to, because he doesn't know how to throw the forward pass. But there's undoubtedly, Fashanu is far more advanced as a pass blocker than a run blocker. The film that I saw on him, he doesn't use his physical tools like he should, and he needs a coach to kind of get that out of him. But anyway, back to what I was saying. If you're forcing me to go with a name, I'm going to say hopefully that Talise Fuaga drops to the Saints, and if so, you sprint up to the podium with that name. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be, I just have this feeling it's going to be either Mims or J.C. Latham, and given Latham's experience, I'm going to kind of lean a little bit towards that.
You guys, if y'all looking at that in the background, that was another touchdown the Saints got screwed out of. They claimed Robert Massey was touched. He clearly was not. They took a touchdown off the board. It's the Rams. What can you expect? We get screwed out of TDs by the Rams, although that's the best Rams uniform. Anyway, I'm the thing about Fashanu to me is he is a technician. He is, if we were going to talk about this in terms of Top Gun, okay, he's Iceman.
Yes.
Fashanu does everything technically perfect, but he doesn't have that mean streak. He's not that physical mauler. He's not going to go and put you on your ass. He is just going to be technical on his blocking and not very passionate. And I think that's the part that's missing from his game, that mean streak. You want to see him get mean and get violent, and he's not violent enough. That's why if you take the first group that you named, Alt, Fashanu, and then I kind of throw the Washington and Oregon State tackle side by side, kind of they're about the same.
Okay.
That's the upper group. The next group is Mims and J.C. Latham. A lot further down, you start getting to Guyton, Paul, who somehow they think now is going to go into the first round, just because they think there's so many tackles that are going to be needed. I think I like Latham because I think Latham's got that mean streak. I think Latham's that physical guy. Mims scares me because his lack of experience. But Mims is has the higher ceiling, but the riskier pick than Latham. And I'm worried you're going to fall into the trap that you fell in with Penning, because Penning was a risky pick. And this is the thing that Nick Underhill talked about. And I think Loomis kind of echoed this. This is where I think Underhill got his point from. Loomis, when he was talking about trading down, said, if you're only going to trade down if you think you can get the same quality player at a lower position that you would get where you are right now at 14. You're not going to have that drop off. And I think what he is saying is, and this is what Underhill said as well, when you start getting out of 14 and dropping into, say, 17, 18, 20, you're now going to that second tier of tackles that have some faults.
Yep.
And we just talked about the top two, Mims and J.C. Latham. And then you're running the risk of getting another Penning, who we got at 19, thing, or even Ruiz, who we got at 23, 25, something like that, maybe 29. The lower you go, the more flaws you're going to see. Ramczyk fell as far as he did because he had hip issues coming out of college. Now, of course, it's a degenerative knee condition that's going to end his career, but that's why he fell as far as he did. The Saints passed him on the hip, and of course, it never became a problem. But yeah, it's one of those things that you start looking at guys that are elite, and then you go to that next tier, and at 14, you're right on the edge. Right on the edge too. Absolutely, I think the Saints had the assets. This would be the year that they go and trade 2 number ones to move up to get Joe Alt. This would be the year they would do that. I don't know I don't think they can get high enough to do it. Because just like with the quarterback issue, the quarterback's going 1, 2, 3. So you're not going to, if you wanted a quarterback, you're not trading with any of those three because they want their guy. That what good did we Washington do to trade down from 2 to 14 so we can get a quarterback? The fans be pissed. I mean, think about that. Think about the Saints being at 2, and they need a quarterback, and the Saints go, you know what? We'll get some extra picks, and we'll get a quarterback next year. You got to go watch this crap that we're going to put on the field, and we'll just worry about the quarterback next year.
Right.
The Saints fans be burning the building and flipping cars if that happened. I mean, think about 2006. They instead of taking Reggie Bush at 2, they go ahead and just trade down, and we'll get somebody like Reggie Bush later. You got to take it. You've got to take those players at high. So now you're talking about trading, okay, 4 maybe with the Chargers, but what does it take to get to 4? It's a lot of points, It probably would take both the first and second. Holy shit. Poor Jim. He had no shot. But it would take I'll have to ask Jim one day about that. What was it like getting hit by Vaughn Johnson?
He hated every member of the Dome Patrol. He hated all of them.
I can see why. My God. Oh, this is unbelievable. This is a goal line stand coming up here. And they here we go. Got to get a commercial in there. Yeah, they had no shot. They had no shot of scoring a touchdown. They tried to run a pitch play to the outside. Ain't happening. But yeah, that's the issue when it comes to trading down. A team is going to have to want to trade down, number one, and number two, what does it cost to get that high? And the Saints just don't have those kind of assets. They really don't. So they have to play the weight game. And like I said, if they could, they would trade up for Alt, because that's the best. That is the best tackle of this entire draft by far. I've watched them all this past week. Watch all the footage. Watch 33 and 33. Was it 33 group or something like that? I've watched all the coaches' films and the coaches' critiques of them. And Joe Alt's a mammoth person. 6'7". He can get low, has good bend, can just bury people. Well, I mean, that's tailor-made for a team like the Jets. It's tailor-made for so many of these teams that are desperate for tackles that you just can't get. You can't get up high enough to go grab them. So if you were a betting man, who do you think, if anyone, would slide?
You're talking tackle or period?
Tackle first, then maybe a player, period.
I think if any of the top 3 or 4 slide, and we're in agreement that that Alt and Fashanu are the top 2, followed closely by Fuaga, Fatanu. I can see either Fuaga or Fatanu dropping. Fuaga just because of the type of program that he comes from, not highly respected, Oregon State. And he's not getting a lot of the buzz that some of these other guys are getting. Fatanu, because he doesn't have a consistent projection. Some people project him at guard, others project him at tackle. The ones that project him at guard say he can't play tackle because he doesn't have that prototypical height or length, and he doesn't. The ones that project him to guard, to tackle, are saying that he just doesn't have the brute strength, drive, run blocking force that you want in a guard. To me, he has that. Troy does, but he doesn't have the length of tackle. And that's why, if it's me and I'm the Saints making the pick, and Fuaga, Fatanu, Latham, and Mims are all there, I probably rank Fatanu behind those guys ever so slightly, because he's only 6'3", and those other guys are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". So yeah, that's why I could see Fatanu sliding. Fuaga, Fuaga, I just think he could slide because of the lack of buzz around him. I am interested to see if that lack of buzz is also through the NFL scouting community and through the coaches.
Yeah, that's always interesting part because you want to see we see what the draft experts all say and the draft nicks all say, but clearly once the draft starts, those projections get thrown out the window, and you see guys sliding and rising depending on who falls in love with whom,
Mm-hmm.
based on their pro day, based on their workouts at the combine, all sorts of things. And it's to me, I agree. I think the Oregon State. I'm just going to call the Oregon State, the Penn State. I'm going to say it that way because I'll invert their names. But to me, the Oregon State guy is the guy I think that will probably slide all the way down to 14, because I think he has that guard tackle person. It shouldn't be suspended. No, because I'm blocking this game and you don't have the sound. So the game doesn't affect it at all. One thing about this service I'm on, they want me to plug a DSL line into this instead of using the wireless. And it's insane because I'm like, what is this, 2004, 2003? Nobody has anything plugged in anymore. But that's what they keep insisting is the issue. But I think it's their servers, and they want me to spend more money to upgrade to the good servers, so I don't have these issues. But if the stream is suspended, let me know. Because yeah, you're right. There's always a game playing behind me, but I can get away with it because number one, you don't hear the sound, and number two, I'm partially blocking it. So. Yeah, Goodell strikes again. Goodell wouldn't want to see this game. Anyway, going back to what I was saying earlier, so I think that's where the Saints would have an interesting debate among themselves. So let's say the Oregon State tackle is there, but they also have Mims and Latham to choose from. You talk about the height of the Oregon State player. Him being only 6'3" and possibly being kicked over to guard, you don't want that. You want a pure tackle right now because you have no tackles. We don't know what we're going to get out of Penning. So to me, I would probably start leaning more towards Mims and Latham at this point. I probably would look at the Oregon State guy if I were to trade back and think I could get a guy like that. But again, here we are talking about the warts of each of these players. Size for the Oregon State guy, lack of experience from Mims from Georgia, Latham, his ceiling may be a little bit lower than some of the other tackles. So, that's to me, that's the issues when you get to that point. Players in general that you could see sliding out of the top 15, or sliding to 14. What players do you think you could see doing that?
Well, I mean, you talk about the quarterbacks. The top three are going to be LSU, North Carolina, USC. Whatever order. Well, we know Caleb Williams is going to go first. After that, I think JJ McCarthy. I don't know why, but JJ McCarthy is going to be up there. After that, it seems to be, and you've joined us on our Bayou Blitz draft cast the last few years. There's always one quarterback that everybody expects to go in the first round that you're still talking about maybe midway into day two. I could see that being either Bo Nix or Michael Penix. Probably Penix, if you believe the draft experts. I personally think Penix is going to come off the board before Bo Nix. So I believe actually that both of those guys are going to be there at 14. Another guy had early projections of a top 10, top 12 pick, Graham Barton, the guard tackle from Duke. I think he'll be there at 14. Newton, the defensive tackle from Illinois. Any other year, he's the consensus top pick at defensive tackle. Any other year, he is probably a top 10 or 12 pick. But because of the offensive tackle talent, because of 3 receivers going in the high in the first round, and because of the quarterbacks, I think Newton slips as well. And I think Rome Odunze slips also. Neighbors and Harrison are going to be top 7 picks. Odunze should be a top 10 pick, but again, the teams that end up with Neighbors, the team that ends up with Harrison, they have their wideouts. After that, you might see a wide receiver needy team saying, like Chicago, for example, you know what, we do have 9, but we want to protect our new quarterback a little more than we want him to have a shiny new target to throw to. So, bam, they pull the trigger on a tackle instead of a Odunze. Same with the Jets. Need a wide receiver. Maybe they go Brock Bowers for Aaron Rodgers instead. Maybe they get a tackle for Aaron Rodgers instead. So it's those kind of scenarios that Odunze could wind up dropping, maybe even out of the top 12 and maybe sitting there at 14.
It would be really interesting because I, of course, think Bowers is somebody who's probably going to be there at 14. And if you wanted to trade down, you want to trade down maybe a couple of slots only. If we're looking at that scenario, what I was saying with the Oregon State tackle, Mims and Latham, if you slide down to say 18 or 20 at the lowest, you probably could get one of those 3 there still and pick up an extra pick. If somebody really wants Bowers, you could probably get a 3rd round pick if somebody really, really wanted Bowers at that point.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting scenario to see play out. I believe that the Saints are probably going to do a tackle and a wide receiver with these 2 picks. I've been preaching defensive tackle, but I feel like, and you gave a great example with Odunze sliding. If Odunze is available, and Bowers as well, okay, and all your top tackles, including the Oregon State tackle, are now off the board, do you take Odunze 14 and hope Paul is there at 45? Or do you try and trade a 1st round pick this year, next year, to get back into the 1st round, the bottom half of the 1st round, to take maybe a tackle? Do you do something like that?
No. And I'll tell you, I love Rome Odunze. I think he's going to be a fantastic receiver. I love all 3 of those Washington Husky receivers, to be honest. But I love Rome, and I would love to see him in New Orleans. But the fact is, you need a tackle so badly because you have botched this position beyond recognition. It's FUBARD. It's beyond recognition. You have Ryan Ramczyk, who may or may not be able to walk by the time the season starts, let alone play. Andrus Peat, who was always a better guard than tackle anyway, is still on the free agent market. And even if you yourself in the building, even if your people in the building believe in Trevor Penning, he hasn't shown anything yet to anybody. So you need a tackle. So, yeah, if Brock Bowers is sitting there, if Rome Odunze is sitting there, hell, if Marvin Harrison inexplicably slides and sits there, you might want to blow your brains out for passing on them, but you have to pass on them to get a tackle. And I've had this argument several times. Even trying to use my own words against me. Bob, you say the tackle position is so deep. You should be able to get one in the second round. Yeah, you should, but there's no guarantee that you will. And you can't afford to take that gamble at this position when you literally have nobody except for lukewarm bodies to put there right now. You need to have a tackle with your first pick. End of story. Like I said, you might want to blow your brains out for passing on these other guys, but it's you yourself, New Orleans Saints, that have botched this position beyond recognition to paint yourself into this corner.
Yeah, I mean, even if you were sold that Penning's problem was a lack of confidence and not getting along with his offensive line coach, which is entirely possible, I can accept that rationale. Do you really want to risk having Penning start for you, and he's going to start on the left side?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to risk that? Are you going to risk having to try and bring back Andres Pete, who always gets hurt? You always worry about him being injured, or do you take a shot and go sign Becton and hope he can stay healthy and is better than what he was his last year with the Jets? And it's kind of weird because some of these tackles have been compared to Becton, which is
Yeah.
interesting, and it's like, yeah, I can see it, but man, Becton was terrible last year. His last year with the Jets. Now he was injured a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a Pete problem again. So I would feel better, honestly, on passing on taking a tackle in the first round if they would have signed somebody in free agency to a big contract.
Yeah.
Go grab one of those top tackles right out the gate and try and do something with that.
Yeah.
And say, okay, that's going to be my left tackle. And what we're looking at really is replacing right tackle. And we're going to hold out hope that Ramczyk can play. But if not, we think we could get something out of a Becton. We might be able to do something with Penning. Hell, we might be able to do something with Landon Young, who's been in there. I would feel better with that because then you could be a left-handed team and you could say, okay, we can try and piece together some guards. We'll talk people in the Salvador and all these things. But the offensive line really is missing 3 starters.
Yeah.
It really is. So it's so hard. And those, I've said this before too. Everybody wants a top offensive line. Nobody ever wants to draft a top offensive line because it's boring. The Saints draft a tackle. Here we go. Okay, whatever. There's that you don't get excited looking at tackle highlights. You get excited watching receiver highlights.
Yeah.
You get excited watching quarterback highlights or running back highlights. Skill players. So,
Alan, listen, you don't got to tell me. I have watched extensive film on 86 players this year, and I have published profiles, analytical profiles on 19 offensive linemen. I'm sick of fat guys.
Yeah, I hear you. I've watched enough of it too. I'm tired of seeing fat guys and seeing guys looking at their feet and looking at their hands and how much bend they got and that kind of stuff. I mean, it is a boring way to look at, and it's like getting a pair of socks for Christmas. You need them, or underwear. You need them, but it ain't exciting. It's not the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier that shoots planes off. That's what the hell you wanted for Christmas. You don't want socks, and that's what offensive linemen are. They're socks. They're functional. But you know what? You have no socks, and the socks you have have so many holes in it, your toes keep slipping out of them each when you're walking. So it aggravates the shit out of you when you're walking around. So you need socks. So yeah, I want to throw those scenarios out to you though, because I wanted to see what the thought process is, because yeah, it would be very hard to pass on these guys. It'd be very hard to pass. I love Brock Bowers, but it's just not happening. I would be kicking myself too if I'm looking at these Washington receivers at 14 and going, my God, this guy could be the next Michael Thomas as
Yeah.
far as production. And good God, imagine that threesome or foursome, because we want to throw A.T. Perry in there. That foursome running this offense, doing the kind of creative things that you saw a guy that you saw Shanahan doing over there in in San Francisco, where we could do some cool stuff with all these receivers.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't complete passes these receivers if Carr is laying on his back or is getting crunched or is getting knocked out of every other game because his protection's so bad and you can't run the football, which is what we saw a lot last year.
Yep.
So it's tough. It really is.
Well,
Okay.
and yeah, the guy playing quarterback behind you right now is a perfect example of that. How many years were you looking at that Saints offense, and you had Childs at tight end, you had Wes Chandler at wide receiver. I forget who the other receiver was. I could see his number 82. Yes, Paris. You had Galbraith and Galbraith and Muncie, coming out of the backfield.
Mm-hmm.
Why weren't they competing for the NFC title every year? Because he had nobody to protect him. He was always running for his life, like you just saw. So you never got a chance to see how good Archie Manning was, or how good this offense could have been with all those weapons, because they had nobody to protect him. And like you said, Alan, you look at that Saints offensive line, everybody on the roster right now, and you have two viable starters, Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, who frankly I don't think is a viable starter, but at least he's had one good year out of four, which is more than what you could say out of the rest of those guys. You need a tackle with your first pick, period.
And you want Alvin Kamara is probably playing for his last year as a Saint. He's got a huge contract, and it's a big number. It gets even bigger next year. You can't go into the season with a 31-year-old running back with that kind of number. So you've hired coaches who are going to teach this outside zone run blocking scheme. They need guards and tackles that can move. Now, we've run some inside zone stuff, but not so much outside zone.
Mm-hmm.
And this team is going to be a run-first offense. So, the only way you can run that football is if you've got offensive linemen not only that can block, but can move. And that's the only way you're going to win. If you can't block and they can't run the football, you're not going to win. You're going to get some shootouts and you're going to get some big pass plays, but it's going to be what everybody likes to say. Oh, that's all garbage time points. Oh, it's all garbage time stats. That's the unfortunate thing. That's why you have to take offensive linemen.
Yep. Well, consider this too, and this is to your falls right in line with your point. The Saints had the second worst average per run statistic, average per run number in the league last year, behind only, I believe it was the Carolina Panthers. That's abysmal. And it's not like you don't have running back talent on this team. Kendre Miller was banged up, but you saw what he could do. Jamal Williams, we know, can be a quality back. And you already know what Alvin Kamara can do, and Taysom Hill for that matter, too. And you still were the second worst rush average team in the NFL. That speaks volumes right there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, poor Archie. This is his rookie year, too. Look what they're doing to him. And this was all legal. There was no flags thrown. I mean, picking him up, throwing him on, yeah. And that's why you see so many shots of number 14, Ed Hargett, coming in, because not because, oh, we're going to let Archie kind of learn from the bench and come in a little bit. No, it's because Archie was getting killed. So they had to send Ed Hargett in there to play some of the games. And that's not a play sheet. That's a pad on his arm because he had broke his arm his senior year at Ole Miss. So they had a pad for him to wear to protect that arm from it getting broken again. So God, I mean, yeah, this is the Saints. This is what it was like to watch these guys. Um, anyway, this is by the way. Oh, and this isn't the play. Okay, there's going to be a play they're going to show. The linebacker for the Packers under Lombardi, 66. God, I can picture him. Like Frank
Nitschke?
Barone. Yeah, Ray Nitschke. Ray Nitschke's only scored one touchdown on special teams, and it was against the Saints. They blocked an extra point or a field goal attempt, and the holder scooped it up. And there's Jake Cup. That's Cooper Cup's grandfather right there, 50. He scoops it up and throws the ball to Nitschke, who ran in for a touchdown. That's his only touchdown reception ever as a as a Green Bay Packer. So, but so let's look at the second round pick, the 45th pick. I have been saying that there's got to be a way the Saints can turn 2 picks into 4. We don't think they'll trade from 14 for the reasons that we listed. So can the Saints turn 2 picks into 3?
Yeah, they can. But I think it might take trading down from 45 to do it. You might have to swap positions with somebody that has a later second round pick and a late third round pick to pick up. Because otherwise, you're sitting there at number 45 in the second round, and then you don't pick again until 150, which is the midway through the 5th round. Granted, you have 4 5th-round picks, two 6th-round picks. I think even trading all 6 of those day 3 picks, 7 if you count the 7th round, I think if you offer that to a team for a 3rd rounder, I still don't think a team takes it. You might be able to get away with that with an earlier mid 4th rounder, which is quite possibly what we could see happen. But for the Saints to pick up a 3rd round pick or an early 4th round pick, I think it might involve trading down a little bit from 45, staying in the 2nd round. But again, you pick up a late second, you swap it for a late 2nd round pick and either a late 3rd or an early 4th, that kind of scenario. Because if you don't, then you're looking at trading multiple, 3 or 4 of those 5th rounders and a 4th or a 3rd in 2025, which is, I can envision that scenario too, just to move into the 3rd round. One of those 2 scenarios, and I do believe that one of them will take place, because I've said it from day one in this offseason. I cannot see Mickey Loomis being content with, okay, we're picking at 45 and not again until 150. All right, let's let the draft come to us. Now, that's always been the sweet spot where Mickey Loomis likes to wheel and deal anyway, that 3rd, 4th round range. So you're going to see it happen.
Yeah, I think they trade several of those 5th. They've got 4 5ths.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they package a few of those to get back in at least into the 4th round. To try and get somebody in the 4th. And I think that's where you'll see a guard, maybe another tackle, defensive tackle, someone like that coming out of this part of the draft. When I've done mocks, I've had to trade future assets to get a high 2nd round pick or a high 3rd round pick, and it usually involved me trading a higher pick next year to get it. So it was a 1st round pick in 2025 for a 2nd round pick, a high 2nd round pick in 2024, and the same, 2nd round for next year for a 3rd rounder. that kind of stuff. So I was able to get some of those top players, like getting two tackles or getting a guard and a tackle combo, and getting a wide receiver as well. Um, the more I watch and evaluate some of these things about the Saints, the more I'm convinced that Loomis is going to take a tackle in the first round and a receiver in the second round. I just feel like that's where he's going with this. We do need a defensive tackle. We do need a linebacker. We need safeties, but there's a lot of safeties in free agency still.
Yeah.
So I think, like, looking at the assets they have, if they trade back into the third round or the fourth round, if they if they have a way of getting back in the top 100 picks, because that's really the sweet spot, that's really where you want to be. Who do you see them taking in the second round at 45 or somewhere in the top of the second round?
I know what you're saying about receiver, and I can almost feel it too. But I can just as easily envision Saints going defense in the second round, either defensive tackle or safety. Now it has to, unlike what we said about offensive tackle, where, hey, listen, they just need one of these tackles. It's not going to be that kind of scenario if they bypass a receiver for a defensive tackle or a safety. It's going to be for a specific guy they like, maybe a Chris Jenkins from Michigan. We talked about Tavondre Sweat, maybe grabbing him, before he's projected to slide now, but he ain't going to slide till the fifth round. I can guarantee you that. Maybe a safety if Minnesota's Tyler Nubin is still on the board. If Washington State's Jaden Hicks, who I really love, I can see one of those guys. If you're right, and you're not the only one that I've heard or seen say this, and they go receiver, I know the guy that all Saints fans want and are clamoring for right now is Xavier Legette. Just looking at the pure numbers, I can see why. Personally, and here I am going back to the Washington Huskies. Jalen Polk is, if they draft a receiver in the second round, Jalen Polk is the guy that I want. You want to talk about a Michael Thomas kind of guy. Now Polk isn't at Mike's size. He's 6'1", 203, but he has that playing style. That physical style. Just owns the intermediate routes, owns contested catches, terrific leaping ability, but the speed to take a top off a defense. That's the guy that I'd want. You're seeing some other slot guys pick up some steam, not just for the Saints, but just in that general vicinity of the second round. Malachi Corley, Ricky Pearsall from Florida, some of those other slot guys. I don't know, because they were running A.T. Perry out of the slot with some success last year. They know Olave can move to the slot, with Perry and Shaheed are on the outside. And Cedric Wilson, who they just signed in free agency, has some slot and X receiver flexibility too. So I think they genuinely go best available player on their board at either defensive tackle, safety, or wide receiver here.
Yeah, and safety is the only thing I've kind of downgraded, only because there's so many available still in free agency. The market really stinks.
You're right.
But
and there's also nice depth here at that safety position, where I think you can get a quality starter in day 3.
Yeah. One of the safeties that I keep seeing popping up, I think he's from Wake Forest, Musafa. I
hope they draft him so I can wear this shirt all the time, because when you first glance at the name, it looks like Mufasa.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see. I gotta go look at one of my mocks I did. I've done so many of them, and I sent them to my son because he's doing a ton of mocks as well. Okay, it's not here. It's got to be here. There's several receivers I like, and I think Malik Musafa Mustafa is the guy I've been seeing pop up a lot. And the only
Hmm.
negative I have for him, he's 5'10". I would like him to be 6 foot as a safety, but I still like him because he's a heady player. And
Yeah.
you look at guys that were leaders on their team and so forth. Um, yeah, the kid at Oregon State is dangerous, but he's 5'3". We're talking about receivers too. Yeah, Leggett has high bust potential, but it's that Cordell Patterson thing.
Yeah.
You try him at a kick returner, and then maybe try and use him kind of like Patterson, kind of like Debo Samuel? Where you're using him as a running back slash receiver.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I know. My son goes back and forth over
Oh,
and over and over again with Luke McCaffrey. I mean, it's the name, and he is somebody you can get late too.
yep.
Um, let's Yeah,
No, I
when
look
I
at I look at
traded.
Leggett and I see a guy that has terrific measurables, and just has the athleticism and one year production that just makes you drool. But I also see a guy that can't read a defense. So you're going to have to scheme to get him open until he can learn, if he can learn to run an expanded route tree and learn
Mhm.
how to pick up the sweet spots in those zones. And yeah, again, at 45, if you told me Leggett was there, late in the third round when you're looking to trade for a specific player, maybe that's a guy type of guy I target. Uh, but 45 is a guy that this team needs to be able to plug and play right away with high immediate production. And I don't see it out of Leggett. It's too much of a roll of dice for me.
Well, and I get that too. The hard problem about that is what you're looking for specifically as a receiver. You really have two speed guys on this team. With Olave and with Shaheed. So what you're looking for is that contested catch,
Mm-hmm.
go over the middle, take the punishment. The funny thing is, the Saints have really been remarkable at getting guys, even undrafted guys. He's the latest, but Deontay Hardy.
Yep.
Getting guys that have turned into productive receivers for them. I mean, I don't think anybody could have got anything out of Brandon Coleman, and uh, you got something out of Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
He was better to me. He was better in some cases than somebody you drafted
Yeah.
in Traquan Smith. You know,
Not in
and
some cases, in all cases.
yeah, but so to me, you're targeting something specifically. So you're looking for a big, thick, physical receiver. So it knocks out a lot of guys that are speed guys,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what a lot of teams are looking for, that home run threat, that
Mm-hmm.
small smurf kind of receiver that's going to go out there and just, they're all looking for the next Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Every time I look at Tyreek Hill, I always picture Al Davis just like drooling and like beating his face against the glass, because he's only been looking for another Cliff Branch his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a guy, that's a kind of guy that most of the teams in the league are looking for. They're not looking for the big, slow, thick receivers. So that's a good thing for the Saints. So I think you'll see some of those bigger guys now. Calvin's boy, Adonai Mitchell, he's somebody I see creeping up on a lot of boards.
Yeah.
Bottom half of the first, top of the second.
Yeah.
Mitchell is somebody that gives you a lot of the things that you could get out of Leggett, but he's a better overall receiver.
Yeah.
But you're kind of selling me a little bit on these Washington receivers, because Jalen Polk, the guy you were just talking about a few minutes ago, he would be an ideal guy if he was there in the second round. There's a guy I'm probably knocking people over in the draft room. You go run that card up on the top.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
terrific route precision. Can run a full route tree. The film I've seen, which is a lot, he has good physicality and is dominant at the catch point. I mean, he just exceptional hands, and he doesn't have that world class, that Tyreek Hill speed, but I mean, he ran a 4.5. At the combine, and more importantly to me, his 10-yard split was a 1.52. That means that this guy has a burst, has instant acceleration, and that's what's going to get you separation in the NFL.
And a guy like I'm thinking the guy like Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, that guy, that's going to be somebody a lot of teams are going to want to get because everyone's going to be looking for the next Tyreek Hill. So there's a guy who probably gets overdrafted for what he is, but he's a burner. He's a speedster, and that's what they want. So, to me, some of the bigger receivers should be available there. But the question becomes, if you take a receiver at 45, you better have a plan to get back into this draft in the bottom of the second, third, or fourth round because you cannot go that far without getting back in. And to me, I think the Saints are going to have some kind of plan in place or deal already in place, and just wait for the time to announce it before they make that pick. And I don't know if they can do that because that's an awful risk because a team could just yank that deal out from underneath you after you make your pick because you may have grabbed the guy they wanted.
Absolutely. And again, you have to go back to what do you have on the roster right now? I personally would feel better going into if the season started tomorrow, and you told me that Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, Cedric Wilson were my top 4 receivers. Equanimous St. Brown would be my 5th guy. And then you told me who my defensive tackles are. Brissy, I'm feeling real good with. Shepard, I'm feeling okay with. And then I have Kalen Saunders and a couple of guys I pull off the practice squad. Then you show me my safety room. Tyrann Mathieu, who's a little bit more limited at this stage of his career. Jordan Howden, who was promising but erratic as a rookie. And Jonathan Abram is my 3rd safety. That's why I think they could go defense at 45 and wait to see what receivers are left later in the draft.
What position would you say this team has drafted the best? I know I'm kind of catching you off guard there, but
it's a good question. You mean recently?
Recently, yeah. Since Jeff Ireland has come in.
Okay. I'd say without question, it's the defensive backfield for me, the secondary for me, generally speaking, and safety specifically. Because you've drafted very well. I mean, cornerback, you've drafted Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, Marshawn Lattimore. Any of those 3 guys could start for every team in the NFL. Lattimore being an elite caliber of player. But safety, you've gotten value throughout the draft. Jordan Howden was a 5th round pick. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a 4th rounder. You got Von Bell and Marcus Williams in the 2nd round. And then Malcolm Jenkins in the 1st round. And even the human dickhead known as Kenny Vaccaro gave you some decent play as a 1st round pick. So I just off the top of my head, I would say secondary in general and safety specifically.
Yeah, and I'm thinking the same thing too because you have been able to find safeties up and down this draft. So it would be knowing that, and I'm not trying to undercut your point because I still think safety is a possibility in the 2nd round. But I think the Saints also feel confident enough because Dennis Allen was initially the Saints secondary coach going back to the Super Bowl year. Dennis Allen has done a remarkable job, and so has Chris Chris Richard, not Chris Jenkins, Chris Richard, um, Joe Brown, the coaches they brought in, even Aaron Glenn, who is now defensive coordinator over there in Detroit, have done a remarkable job coaching the safeties and coaching the defensive back
Yeah.
secondary in general. The secondary has gone from a liability, which it was for most of this team's existence, even during the Dome Patrol years. The safety, the secondary is a liability to probably the most consistent strength. It really is because Isaac Gidham. What are the odds that a guy like Isaac Gidham is going to be able to play at the level he played?
You're right.
Because you know, you hate them, but not hit them, but you hate the guys that they've had before playing back there. I'm drawing a blank on their names now. The undrafted free agents, the Crawley, Ken Crawley, guys like that really had no business starting. Even PJ Williams, and they're able to figure out a role and get things going. Yeah. I like Sweat a lot, and Sweat's always been my top choice at defensive tackle. And I talked about this last week. I like the idea of having Granderson, Brzee, Sweat, and then right now Chase Young. I like that as my starting four. Then I'm working Foskey, and I'm having him go in for Granderson, go in for Young, working him in as well to see what I can do with him, and
Mm-hmm.
then be able to pull Saunders and Shepard off the bench to come in for limited snaps as a wave player. And then you have Cam Jordan coming in there and he's taking snaps, but you're not dependent on him. I like that because I think that this team needs that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm happy with that kind of production. So yeah, if you're telling me we're going to get, and I also feel confident they're going to find receivers late in the draft or
Right.
undrafted free agents
Right.
that'll be able to produce. You don't need a starter, but a starter would be nice because your threesome looks like right now it's going to be um, uh, Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry. And I think if I would say a second position that the Saints have drafted well after the defensive backs, it's going to be receivers, honestly, or finding guys. Traquan Smith pushed aside. You look at, Michael Thomas was a second round pick.
Yep.
And look what you got out of that second round pick. Chris Olave, I give the team shit for trading up to get him, but honestly, he's probably the most productive receiver. He is the most productive receiver out of that class so far. And then you throw in the Rashid Shaheeds and the Deontay Hardy, and even going back to Brandon Coleman and guys. I got productive guys that were undrafted free agents that you're able to do things with. And go back even further, and you talk about guys like Lance Moore.
Yeah.
Marcus Colston, a 7th round pick. Granted, it's different kind of guys, but still you're able to do something with these guys.
No, A.T. Perry was a 6th round pick. Granted, he was projected to be a day 2 pick, but they still got him in the 6th round.
Yeah, exactly. So, here we are talking about, he's not employed yet. He probably won't be employed until training camp. Honestly, I think he can't pass a physical right now. I also don't think he's going to pick his team, and he's going to come in during training camp for somebody, or right before training camp for somebody.
Yeah, he's gonna ring chase on a 1-year contract, and hope that he stays healthy so he can cash in on a bigger deal the following year, I think.
And he's going to go to a team like the Ravens or a team like the Chiefs. He's not going to the Bucks. He's not going to Atlanta. His goal is not to haunt the Saints. His goal is to win a championship and ring chase. That's just, he's going to be a mercenary kind of player right now. He's put up all the stats. He wants the championship, and
Hmm.
that's got to be his career. Um, so yeah, uh, we're talking about safety and wide receivers going in the second, but at the same time, we're also pointing out they're able to find guys late. So maybe you don't have to take that. I start talking myself into defensive
I
tackle. Uh,
Same thing. Same thing. Not
yeah,
only Sweat,
yeah,
but I mean,
but
Chris Jenkins here, Braden Fisk from Florida State. I like Dwayne Carter from Duke a lot too. Now those guys are probably, yeah, again, a Dwayne Carter, a Tavondre Sweat if he slips. If those guys are sitting there middle, late third round, those are the kind of guys. And you and I have both said it before too. Mickey Loomis and Sean Payton before, when it was Peyton Loomis, they never traded to get into the round, into specific rounds for a position. They'd always say, "We want this player. He's still on the board. Let's go get him." So
yeah,
maybe one of those defensive tackles or one of those receivers that we mentioned or one of those safeties, they're going to be a very specific target if one of them aren't taken off the board in the second round.
and let me pull this question up here because Calvin asked a good one. Um, So Calvin says Patrick Paul is like Fashanu with a second round grade. If they go right tackle in the first and pick a guy like Paul in the second, will we be okay with that? So basically, we're talking about first round getting a tackle, the right tackle, and then second round 45, you're picking up a guy like Paul. So you went back to back tackles. Would you be okay with that?
I'd be okay. And no, Patrick Paul is only similar to Fashanu. Fashanu is far more advanced in his skill set. But as far as the logic behind it, if and only the Saints know this, if the Saints know that Trevor Penning can't play, and the Saints know that Ryan Ramczyk isn't going to be available, or if so, you're only on borrowed time and the sand is running out of that hourglass quick. And you have the opportunity to get a left tackle and a right tackle in back-to-back rounds that stand a good chance at each starting day one. Again, just like you said earlier, it's like a pair of socks, getting socks and underwear. It's not pretty, but you need them for your everyday wardrobe. So yeah, would I be okay with it? It would tell me a lot about Penning and Ryan Ramczyk, that's for sure. But again, if the Saints are convinced that Penning can't play and Ramczyk isn't going to be able to play, and you have the opportunity to do it, you do it, and then you patch up those other holes as best you can.
Yeah, and I'm kind of this. I feel this way. I think they're going to still try and take their chances with Penning. But I agree. I think Ramczyk's career is over with. The Saints know it, but
Yeah.
they don't want to say it. Um,
You don't
I
want to tip your hand before the draft, basically.
yeah. Well, that and you also, you're trying to hold out hope that maybe he could come back. But to me, I mean, I said last year that Ramczyk did not look like the player he used to be. And 2 years ago, I was saying his knee is giving him too much trouble. He
Yeah.
is not. I mean, he was erasing people in 2017 and 2018. Um, and then when it got to 2020, 2021, you started seeing him slip a little bit and not be as dominant as he was those early years. And you know, it's not Willie Rofe aside, because Willie Rofe really played a really long time for a tackle. Stan Brock too. Um, an 8-year career, a 9-year career, that's a good career for a tackle in the NFL, an offensive
Hmm.
tackle, and that's where he is. He's basically in that, was it year 7, year 8, um, coming into this year. And it's for a guy, when you drafted him and he had question marks about his health, and you got 8 good years and a couple of them all pro years, that's a great pick.
Yeah.
Calvin says this too. Connor Williams is still available. He's coming off an injury, but a 26-year-old starting guard wouldn't be half bad. I know he might be ready right away. Hey, at this point, I'm taking bodies, man. I'm
Hmm.
taking a shot because I know my son, for example, is in love with Christian Mahogany, the Boston College guard. Um, you
Can't move.
know,
He'll beat you. He'll beat the hell out of you in a phone booth, but he can't move.
well, and that's the hard part because he's a mauler. And if we're doing a straight on blocking, he's ideal for that. But very few teams do that anymore. Everybody uses some form of zone blocking now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that's the hard part about a guy like Mahogany. I'm looking at guys, and this is really getting into the weeds, but Zach Zittner from
Yeah.
Michigan. I'm targeting players now in my draft. I'm looking at guys that like to move, guys that can cut and move in a zone scheme because that's what the Saints are going to do.
Yeah. You watch for Cooper Beebe from Kansas State.
Yeah.
Brandon Coleman from TCU, and I just want another Brandon Coleman on the roster. Dominic Puny from Kansas. Those are some of the guys to watch. Calvin, you made a great point about Connor Williams. I said it coming into free agency that I thought that that should be one of the guys that the Saints do target, even with his injury history. Connor Williams, Pete, Mekhi Becton. You're going to see those guys come off real quick. Right after the draft, maybe even before the draft ends, once you get outside of day one and day two. So maybe the Saints plan on zeroing in on one of those guys, bringing back Trey Turner. I'm a big advocate for that. But again, none of those guys are proven tackles. Even Pete, who played well there last year. So you need at least one tackle out of this draft.
Yep. Absolutely. So would I want to see them take back-to-back tackles? No. But if they did, I'd understand it. I really would prefer a first-round pick be the tackle, and the second-round pick being receiver, defensive tackle, safety, probably in that order. I know we talked a lot about linebacker last year and last week, and I still love the kid from North Carolina, Peyton. But with as few assets that we have in the top 100, the only way I'm taking Peyton is if somehow I can turn 2 picks into 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Then I'm taking him probably in the third. And he's got the injury concerns, and you can hear all the fans already. Oh yeah, that's typical Saints, take an injury prone linebacker. But oh yeah, my wife had something to say about the show title. Great show title. I used the Boston song Foreplay long time. She's like, really? Foreplay? I'm like, that's the name of the song. What do you want me to say? That I'm not going to put long time, but the long time is how long it's been since we drafted the quarterback. I feel the same way, Calvin, because I think it's a risk reward. But yeah, it's these fans. I had and this is the last thing we're going to talk about before we have to go, because I can see Bob's fading. This is what happens during the draft. You know this. You've been up in all the films the whole time. But I got into a 2-day argument with somebody on Twitter who is dying for the Saints to take a quarterback. And he kept bashing Carr. And I'm like, dude, I'm not defending Carr.
No.
I'm saying that you can't just take a quarterback at 14 and say the hell with it, and I'll hope that I can just manufacture blockers. And he was trying to tell me, well, maybe Ramczyk isn't as bad off as he is. Maybe, it's Carr's slow decision-making process and immobility that was the reason why he was getting sacked so much, made the offensive line look worse than it really was. And I said, what about the running game? And he's like, well, that's Pete Carmichael's play calling, running Kamara up the middle. That's why they couldn't run the football. It wasn't imaginative. It wasn't creative. And I'm like, I get it, dude. You want to break that streak. You want that quarterback, and a cheap contract. And I think I melted his mind because I said the problem is you've got um, Carr's contract hanging over this team like the I'm gonna butcher this name now, but Democrates' sword, the sword that dangles overhead. I said that is hanging over this team. You can't cut him. You can't trade him. You have to pay him these years. So there's no point in taking a quarterback now with your short draft picks. You have needs. You have to have these other players, and we spent
Yep.
this entire show talking about them. You know, yeah, it'd be wonderful. I would love to get Michael Penix. I would love to get one of those top 3 quarterbacks up there, but have a guy sit for a year and basically throw out the same team I put out last year. That's a disaster.
Worse. It's a worse team.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I agree with you, Calvin. I think Doug Marrone was a problem.
He was.
I think he was just the wrong kind of coach for the kind of players they have. But I also think there's a fundamental talent problem. And I think we saw, you go back to the 2019 playoff game against the Vikings, where they flipped the guards and the tackles, the pass rushers and the tackles to play against the Saints guards and ate those guards alive. That's why Larry Warford is gone. And that single-handedly cost the Saints a chance to win that game. I think that tells you that and the players that you have on our offensive line. Yeah, the fans do drive me nuts with that kind of stuff because they fall in love with names. Yeah, I know. They fall in love with names and they think they're smarter than the GMs and all these things. And it's tough. Bob, are y'all doing a Bayou Blitz before the draft? Or are y'all going to do the Bayou Blitz of the draft?
I don't think people can stand to see my face, 4 days in a row for the Bayou Blitz. And when a lot of the Bayou Blitz viewers are the same as Under the Dome, so that means you get 5 days of Bob Rose. Nobody wants that. So we will not be doing a Bayou Blitz tomorrow. I'm going to continue to scramble to get the last 10 or 12 of my draft profiles crunched in, and published before Thursday. Your Bayou Blitz, ladies and gentlemen, will be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, all live draft coverage. Thursday, we go on the air at 7:50. I believe it's 7:50 Eastern time. So of course it'd be 6:50, 6:50 Central time. Alan, are you going to be able to join us right away?
On Thursday, I can. Friday, good. I'm not sure. Friday, I'm not so sure, but Thursday, I can.
Okay.
I hope you're not going to wear that shirt every day.
No.
Because it'll be standing by Saturday. You won't have to hold it up because it's going to be held in place.
Now, what I might do, because I have to, during our draft shows, I have to shift my coverage around, so that way I can see the team. I get notified about 30 seconds or a minute or so before the pick is made live on the TV, but I still like to watch it anyway. So I have to shift my room setting around. Therefore, you won't see this background behind us. So instead of moving some of my stuff to put on the back of my couch, maybe I'll just set this up there. Fumigated, of course. Okay. But yeah, I think it might just be you and I for the first hour because Brendan, Brendan has that annoying trait of trying to self-improvement. So he's taking a real estate class, and it's going to be for the first hour of our show. Yeah, I know. I tell him why bother self-improving, but whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's young people. Okay, yeah, I can come on and from the beginning of the draft. That's fine. I can come and join in because I'll just have it on my TV. I'll probably going from my room instead of being in here because my dad will be in here. This is really it's my office, but it's my dad's room. he likes to look at this TV. I don't have it here, obviously, but he likes to look at this TV and watches shows. My dad watches some unbelievable shows. He watches Japanese shows. I mean, it's the Haya Network, and he's watching these movies.
You don't have to go
I,
any further. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's all Japanese, and it's these monsters, not Godzilla, but like science fiction Japanese stuff. It's not anime. It's the most unusual thing I've ever seen. I'm like, how do you even know what's going on? I'm reading the subtitles. I like this. I'm like, hey, my dad took me to Godzilla movies in the drive-in. Sinbad, anything with Ray Harryhausen. He liked that stuff, so he took us to see it. I like that stuff. Jason the Argonauts. I don't care how many times I've seen it. I'm gonna watch it again. I was watching Destroy All Monsters the other day. I found it on Hulu. No, Tubi. I found it on Tubi, and it's a lot of fun. I'm watching this going, I can't believe you drugged my mom to see this film because it's so bad. The plot is so dumb, and it's guys in rubber suits. But I loved it. I really did. The '60s Godzilla films. Those are the ones I like. So yes, I will be there, guys. It's the draft. It's a time to be excited. Time to be optimistic. I think the Saints. I predict the Saints will get two good players. They're going to make the moves. What the exciting part will be is, do the Saints trade back into that third round? So if they do, or get back in the fourth round, if they do, that's really the key to this draft. I'm not so much worried about the back half of the draft as I am the top 100 players. How many players you can get, and everything that I've done is that way. So, now, the Godzilla movie with the little kid dreaming, and he ends up on the island with Godzilla's son. That is my brother screaming the name at me right now as he's watching this. That is the one that I watched. I watched as a kid. Even as a kid, I'm like going, this thing is so weird. This is so weird. That and anything with the one with Mothra, that's the caterpillar with the two little miniature girls that sing that are in a box. Those are the two that just like, somebody did some serious drugs before they came up with the plot of this film. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. I miss Sean. This is the kind of conversation Sean lived for. Last thing before I forget. One of the founders of this network, the C3 network that we have with the Panthers podcast, passed away last week.
Oh no!
This past Joey Ritaliano passed away. Yes. I saw it on Saturday. I think it was Saturday or Sunday morning. Tony had posted it, and it was a picture of him and Joey over at a Panthers game together. And I know he's been fighting health issues.
Yeah.
Gosh, he's been fighting it long before we even started this show back in 2014 or 2016. So, he passed away in his sleep with his family and stuff. So, man, it's tough. It's a lot of the people that put together these kind of shows. It's really sad to see them go. And Bob, the older we get, the more we run into these things. And I always say this whenever someone passes away, there's a great line in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Not a good movie, but there's a great line where he tells the dean of the college, tells Indy, we've reached a point in our lives where life stops giving us things and starts taking them away. And losing Joey is just another little piece that's taken away. So, Joey, man, thank you for this opportunity to do this show. I know you and Sean are talking about this show right now and the things that y'all did. guys, during the season, if you want to get behind enemy lines, check out the C3 podcast.
Oh, love them. Love them.
Tony's a great guy. They've got great people on that show all the time. So yeah, miss you, big guy. Say hi to Sean for us, and we'll see him sooner rather than later. And we'll see you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're at that age too.
We are. Let's be. I was just going to say, don't talk like that, but let's be real here. But Joey, I miss you. Sean, I think about you every day, brother. At least you two can argue and talk football, movies, and wrestling. To your heart's content. But miss you both. C3 podcast. Condolences for your loss. You guys are like family to Alan and I. Been a long time since we caught up, but if you're watching, our thoughts and prayers are with you, Joey's family, and all of you.
Absolutely. Anyway, thank you guys. We'll see you Thursday night in the Bayou Blitz. And I'll see you, Bob, Thursday night. And thanks all for joining us. We'll see you to do the post-mortem on the draft next Tuesday night. In the meantime, thanks, everybody. You have a good evening.